Welcome to the Security Table. This is Chris Romeo. I'm also joined by my co-hosts and good friends, Matt Coles and Izar Tarandash. And we got a special guest today, someone who most people in AppSec will already know who Jim is, but Jim Manico is joining us today. And so Jim, in case there's a few folks out there who maybe don't know who you are, just do a quick intro.
My name's Jim Manico. I've been a software developer since the 90s. I'm a software and application security educator. Chris, I love application security. It's my job and it's a lot of fun. That's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, and I can attest, I've seen you have a lot of fun doing application security at various events and stuff over the years. But let me set up how we got to this conversation, okay? So the year, I think it's 2022. And Izar and I happened to be in Austin, Texas for LastCon. And a certain speaker named Jim Manico is up delivering the keynote. And we had heard in the past, we had heard and seen things that Jim had said about threat modeling that made us think, maybe he wasn't a giant fan of it. But then a slide pops up on the screen where Jim references threat modeling in the threat modeling manifesto. And he says, I've kind of changed my mind some on threat modeling. I see the value proposition in it. And Izar turns to me. He's literally sitting next to me. We're at a round table. He turns to me and he says, did he just say what I think he said? And I looked at Izar, back at him, and I said, yeah, I think he did. I think he just said he's supporting threat modeling. And so for us, it was like we were thinking you were in a different kind of mindset when it came to threat modeling and didn't see the value in it. And so we said, we got to get Jim on this show. We got to unpack this. And so we got to get in the Wayback Machine here for those people that liked cartoons in the 70s and 80s, or the DeLorean or whatever we're going to get in here. But let's travel back in time, Jim, and just let's start out by setting the stage with this story. Like, when you first started doing application security, like how did threat modeling intermingle into it? What was your opinion of it over time?
So I started my career in the 90s, started doing like security services and application security type of work about 10 years later, right, in the early mid 2000s. And I saw a lot of consultants beginning to ramp up and do threat modeling, and the companies were very interested in it and were spending a great deal of money on it. So I want to start by going back and defining threat modeling as it was 20 years ago. So I go ask ChatGPT, give me a snarky version of threat modeling. And it came back and I'm like, ChatGPT, you see me. Threat modeling, the art of gathering a bunch of highly overpaid consultants in a room armed with fancy whiteboards and colorful markers to brainstorm all the ways the system could be compromised. It's like a brainstorming session for the paranoid, but with more jargon, less common sense, and it's extremely expensive. So real quick, we'll start with a fancy diagram of your system. Don't worry if it's not accurate. The point is to make it look really complicated. The more boxes and arrows, the better. This way, we can charge you more for each box we analyze. I'm going to keep going. Identifying threats. This is where we list all the possible threats from the highly possible to the utterly ridiculous. Alien invasion, compromising your data center. Let's add that into the threat model. It's all billable hours anyways, right? Risk assessment. We're going to rank threats based on how scary they sound, not necessarily their actual risk. Remember, the goal is to make everything urgent so you'll keep us around longer. Mitigation strategies. This is where we recommend a bunch of expensive tools and solutions. Whether they fit, that doesn't matter. What's important is they come with hefty licensing fees and require extensive training, which, by the way, we offer. Review, almost done. After all the hard work, we're going to present our findings in a thick report filled with jargon and complex diagrams, and most of it is total fluff you don't need to read, but it's going to look really impressive on your office shelf. And last, the follow-up. Of course, threat modeling is an ongoing process. That means we need to schedule regular follow-up sessions at our premium hourly rate to update the model with new, even more far-fetched threats. That's the threat modeling that I've been railing against for decades. And believe me, Chris, I've seen that. That's a joke, but I've seen that in the real world. So when you want me to talk about threat modeling, the most important thing for me is to start with, what does that mean for you as a company? What does that mean for you as a consultant or a security team? And how do you go about it? And the reason I've been changing my tune is because the tools I see for threat modeling, the tools to analyze software and give me diagrams, the tools to track risk in this area have gotten extraordinarily better in just the last 20 years. And so that's why I'm changing my tune. So when you hear me snark, it's that snark story is what I've seen in the real world many times, which is why I was a naysayer for many years. I'm less so now, Chris. Because
no, I understand.
I'm a student. It's not about religion. This is about science. And as I get new information and see new data and see new processes, like any good scientist, I should change my mind and change it quickly as I see other evidence. And I've certainly seen that.
Yeah. So it's primarily the impact of kind of new tools and technology is really what drove what kind of you started to see. What were you seeing in these tools and technologies that didn't exist before that caused you to kind of to make this move?
Like I see, I won't quote names of tools to protect the innocent, right? But I've seen some tools with really extensive threat classification built into it, so I can describe the kind of application and business I have. They'll give me like a really good threat classification to be concerned with for that kind of business. I used to have to pull that out of the air to figure that out. Now there's really good threat classification in various tools. Number two, I'll mention a few companies I like: Blast, Octo, and Levo AI. These are all the next generation API companies. They're not even threat modeling companies, but they're installing agents and services, and I can click a button, let them run for a bit, and get dramatically accurate and impressive understanding of that microservice architecture, the exact data flows between them. That used to take me 20 plus hours in a threat modeling session. And I have tools that make generation of diagrams a lot easier and extremely more accurate. And the other thing is just process. Like threat modeling used to be Cigital, Adam Showstack, and a couple others, and Amit Sethi, Jim Del Grossio, and that's about it. And now there's hundreds of thousands of professionals that participate in and do threat modeling. And the more we do it, the better we get at it as an industry. This isn't your first threat model, Chris. You've done a few. And if I go back, if I sit in on your first threat modeling session ever, Chris, I'd have probably thrown you out the window and fired you. And if I probably watched you do threat modeling today, my guess is I'd be extraordinarily impressed with your work. Because you've been doing this you're old and gray, you old man. And you've learned, so am I, buddy. So am I. You've learned a lot. So process has gotten better. The tools have gotten better. Threat classification has gotten better. And using all these more modern things, we can make threat modeling extraordinarily more valuable than it was even 10, 20 years ago. Yeah.
And I'm hogging the microphone here, so Matt and Izar jump in at will, but I'll hog the microphone as long as I can, as you guys know. So, threat modeling manifesto. What I know you mentioned that on your slide. That was another thing that Izar and I saw up there. We're like, oh, that's cool, because the three of us here are all co-authors with a number of other folks of the threat modeling manifesto. So, what was the impact of the threat modeling manifesto when you took a look at that, and how did that kind of get into your thinking about threat modeling?
It was really good to see so many professionals that were competitors in the world of threat modeling coming together to talk about why this is important, right? So they defined threat modeling in the first time that I thought was a reasonable definition, right? What are the four key questions? What are we working on? What can go wrong? What are we going to do about it? Do we do a good enough job? They talk about why to threat model. They talk about who should threat model. They talk about the values of a good threat modeling team and consultancy, and like what the ethics are of doing threat modeling. They talk about the core principles of threat modeling. For the first time, threat modeling in my world went from a bunch of overpriced consultants billing me $350 an hour to do fluff to Matthew's like, where do you get that rate from?
I don't remember getting that much.
Talk to me later, Matt. Call me. Let's talk. They took threat modeling from a real fluffy hourly rate thing. This is the first time I think we're really moving. We see competitors in the industry agreeing on what a more ethical, cost-effective, and effective set of processes are going to be. They also talk about anti-patterns, like threat modeling, like to get rid of the hero threat modeler. Focus on practical solutions. Be careful about over-focusing. Be careful about I mean, the things I was concerned about with threat modeling, they addressed without any bullshit pardon my language, without any BS in the manifesto itself. And I thought that was really impressive. They addressed my concerns about the waste that threat modeling could be. That's why I was impressed with it.
So Jim, can I just jump in here, or Chris? What do you think about bringing threat modeling to developers? Making it part of everyone's everyday life, as opposed to something you hire a consultant for to come in and as Izar likes to say, parachute in and solve world hunger for obviously a lot of money.
All developers do not need to be a part of threat modeling. I want my developers writing code and building solutions. I believe threat modeling is most effective when I'm about to build a new project. I want the architect and the lead there, not every developer, right? Or when I'm about to make a very large architecture change, I want some of the leads. I don't want the whole team, right? Traditional threat modeling, they parade every single developer in and ask a bunch of questions. I don't think that's a huge waste of developer time. So I want my developers developing, and I'll have my architects or the lead do threat modeling with the security folks typically. That's just my take on it.
Time for me to jump in.
Izar.
Here, I'll pass you the hand grenade here,
all developer threat modeling, that's great.
So, Jim,
my guys are going to write code while your guys all are sitting in threat modeling meetings for a day. Go ahead.
So, listen.
What you got, Izar?
Long-time fan, first-time RB. So, basically what I'm hearing from you is that you are sort of, in a way, you are disagreeing with yourself. So there's that famous tweet of yours that I use, that Avi Douglas uses, and a lot of other people that I know use to justify a lot of effort by developers, where you point out that nowadays every developer is basically responsible for whatever security is in their company because their code is in the front line, right? And I agree with that wholeheartedly. The thing where I go head-to-head with you is that I think that once you put that forward, saying that every developer is writing stuff that's on the front line, to give an exception to certain developers or to elevate some people because they are architects doesn't really agree with what we see in the field, where the architect gives like a direction and the developer, when they are developing, they are forced to make a number of architectural decisions that might and do influence the threat model overall.
That's a good point. I mean, what I'm trying to say is it depends on a lot of factors, Izar. In some organizations, they're going to pick the architecture, because part of threat modeling is establishing good security architecture patterns that developers follow. So if your company is mature, has architects, and sets a security architecture document that's valuable, then I would deliver that to the developers. I believe in developer training. I want all of my developers to go through security training from one of our companies. We all do. We do a good job. So I want all developers to be educated about security basics, but I don't need to spend 4 hours with every developer threat modeling the authorization code flow in Pixie for OAuth 2. But I do need to do that with the identity architect and some of the devs working on that. So I just don't want the entire team to do threat modeling. I want the entire team to be educated on security and go through regular developer training of some kind. There's many options. But again, I don't want to take my user interface React developer and have them spend 4 hours on OAuth 2 architecture threat modeling. That's not their world. I want them to understand how to do React security, dangerously set inner HTML, ECUs, sanitizer. I got to use my types and prop variables properly. I got blah, blah, blah. I got to make sure I validate URLs that enter an active context. That's not threat modeling. That's technical education. So I like role-based security where the different members of my team are going to do threat modeling only if it's appropriate for their role. Otherwise, I'm being extremely wasteful. That React guy who's busting trying to get me a good UI sitting in a long threat modeling meeting is a waste of time. It's bad to waste engineering time. So yes, I believe in threat modeling. Yes, developers should do threat modeling, but my big problem is how wasteful it's been. And I want to bring that in so I'm doing it cost effectively, especially as the economy changes. especially as things begin to dip. I got to be efficiency in security is going to be the big buzzword for the next 2 or 3 years.
And I think that basically when you put it like that, we agree. The thing is a question of scope.
I like that. Wait, what did you say, Izar? Can you say that louder? I didn't hear you. What? What was that?
It's not the first time. Louder. It's not the first time that I agree with you. It's just that you never got to hear it. But my point here is that my spiel is that threat model every story. So I want that developer threat modeling at the scope that they work, exactly as you said, right? So you have a baseline that covers the whole architecture, but I want the mindset of the developer when they start doing their story to be on a threat modeling point, saying, what choices am I making here that influence the security of the architecture, and is there something that I have to add to the overall threat model?
I agree.
I want to take a question back. I want to ask you this question a little bit further back, Jim, because I think this might inform Izar's kind of threat model every user story, and also your point about limiting the waste that's happening here. What do you see? Like, what do you recommend as far as design for developers? Like, what should they be doing in your mind from, and I'm not talking about just the architects that are putting together the big view of the whole thing, but let's just say a senior software engineer whose normal job is to write feature code. What is the role of design in their world, and how should they do design?
If I'm doing something that I've done many times before, I'm building a UI with database interaction, or I'm doing more of the common features of the application, I don't need to threat model because it's something I've done before over and over and over again. But if I'm about to do something that I don't have guidance on, or something a lot more complicated, like suppose I want to do file upload in a queue with really dangerous file types, and I haven't built that out in my system before. File upload is a major difficult thing to write securely. It is extremely complicated with pieces like file name validation, magic byte validation, content introspection, the persistence strategy. That developers should stop and do threat modeling before they build out that feature, because it's new. We don't have a reference architecture for it. It's mammothly complicated interacting with the database, file system, and more. Now we need to stop and threat model before we build that out. And I usually see this, by the way, just in normal software development. When a developer is faced with a really complicated feature, any good developer is going to talk this over with their peers or technical boss and the customer to get more insight in what that is. Anytime we have a complicated feature that we haven't built out before, I'm often given requirements as a developer, so I have to go back and ask a dozen questions. And even though this might not be threat modeling, now that we're adding security into our process, those complicated questions absolutely should involve an architect, a security person, and involve security. If it's new, if I don't have a reference architecture or example of that done securely already.
So what you're saying is for exceptional conditions.
Exceptional threat modeling.
So Izar, I'm with you, Izar. I'm with you. Izar, I'm with you. You're doing something new and complicated and risky. Stop and design this out with your team before you start writing code. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a world where you've got a library of patterns and you've got threat modeling. And when you establish or you work on a threat model to the point where a threat model can grow into a pattern, basically, what you're describing here. Like you could grow a file upload pattern where you're like, okay, here's all the things that we consider in the threat model, which translated into requirements. So if you're going to do another file upload with dangerous files, here are the things that you have to do. Now, you'd probably want people in that scenario to refresh that, especially if it's 6 months later or 12 months later when they're using it, because things change, right? Like a pattern is not good forever. So some patterns, input validation, I'm never going to believe that's not good. But some patterns like a file upload, things are going to change. New files types are going to come out. Someone's going to, I don't know, attach Bitcoin to it somehow. You know, there's just going to be new derivatives that are going to happen.
We're singing the same song. If I'm doing file upload development for my team for the first time, reference architecture, threat model that out. But if I'm on the other end of that maturity scale, where I have a well-configurable, reusable service for file upload that all my developers can leverage, that's gone through massive assessment, multiple threat modeling rounds, I'm just going to whip it out and do it. I'm not going to go back and threat model. Like, so Izar, it all depends on the context of what's available and what's been done in the past in that team.
And it's interesting that meets the bit where you operate on the secure coding part. Like once you build that library of reference architectures, then you already have reference implementations. Then you already have secure libraries, things that you already know that have been vetted and tested and whatnot. And then you get your developers building with the right Lego pieces.
Exactly. And then we don't need to, we've already done our work in threat modeling. It's the change. It's the big changes or the newness or the, I'm going to mess with the architecture, something that we haven't done before that cries out for threat modeling. Or even better, at the beginning of a project, you know, like more the earlier of before we're writing code, we have an idea, we got budget, and we're going to start writing code. I am not opposed to having a large number of developers in those initial pre-product meetings, and then they can go off and do their work, and then have smaller threat modeling sessions as new things come up. But to your point, Izar, especially at product conception, having like one day of talking about security risk and security duties and what we're about to build, that's a really good idea. Doing it every week on a cycle, every Friday is threat modeling day. Big no. Big no. But at the beginning of a project, I'm more inclined to have more developers participate, to your point, Izar. Izar, do you feel the love in the room right now? Do you feel it? I feel it.
Sort of. I'm still getting some vibes of...
waiting for the left hook.
Yeah. Like, I'm still hearing some vibes of, okay, we got these solutions, and we are very logical and experienced people. And if somebody were to turn off their podcast listening device right now and think, oh my God, this guy's just solved the whole problem, right? So, Jim, why is it that we keep having CVEs? Why is it that we keep having problems? Where are we going wrong?
Because security is hard. Sometimes it's not threat modeling. No. It's just SQL injection, and you didn't scan your code. Oh, believe me, there's a lot of teams that are still, what's SAST? I said this in a manager training once. I went to a bunch of senior managers of a real big company and said, if you're managing software projects and you're not using a static analysis tool, that's negligence. Oh, next thing I know, I'm in front of HR explaining myself why I'm condemning all their managers. But I stand by that statement in 2023. If you're doing a software project, you're writing code, you're not doing static analysis, that is bleeping negligence at this point. Like, what are you doing? You're not doing security. And I'm not trying to sell a certain tool. I'm just saying something like keeping your third-party libraries up to date and scanning your code for security. There's a cost of doing business. And if you're not doing it, you're way behind the 8 ball. And Izar, that's why we still find vulnerabilities today. That's why we still have CVEs, because a lot of software teams are still not doing the basics of security analysis. The basics. That's still...
I have to ask because this came up in a previous episode of ours. How do you feel about DAST tools?
I've given up on DAST.
Yes!
DAST.
Yes!
DAST.
Winner!
In the age of microservices, DAST is a dead technology. At OWASP, we just lost Zap. Zap left the foundation. I love Simon Bennett. He's a great volunteer. But I think watching DAST walk away from OWASP is a sign of the times, because in the DevOps lifecycle, I like IAST. I like SAST. Hey, Jeff Williams, I like IAST. I said it, Jeff. You can quote me on that. I like SAST. I like software composition analysis. But DAST does not work well for a DevOps cycle. It especially doesn't work well for APIs. I know a lot of vendors are going to beat me up for this. But yeah, I've given up on DAST. I don't use DAST.
Well, so just to level set, right? Zap went over to a new initiative called Software
Linux
Security Projects in the Linux Foundation.
Yeah. Yep, it's a great tool, and for an old school web application, absolutely, I would use it. I don't see a lot of old school web apps anymore. I see microservice meshes and React and all kinds of different things where DAST is just not nearly as effective as other tools, and it's slow. It's super slow. I want DevOps life cycles. I want to be able to have a developer issue a PR and run a whole bunch of security tooling in 3 minutes so they can merge. I don't like DAST running for hours. None of those incremental scanning, but just in general, and I'm not talking about me, a large number of my customers who've made their own decisions about tooling have given up on DAST for a lot of reasons. There you go, Chris. Yeah. I like it when we...
Well, I said it about... I mean, I said it a couple of months ago.
DAST is dead.
And I stepped into it because some of the DAST vendors came after me and wanted to argue with me
Good.
about the viability of the technology.
Good.
And I'm like, I don't even have to argue with you. I mean, I have evidence in my own career of trying to use these tools, like you said, against modern applications. They just don't provide any value. Like, I don't need to know that you know, what the DNS records were for the thing you scan. Like, that's the top finding you're giving me coming out of these things. So yeah, it's a definitely a dead technology, but I'm with you. Like, Jeff has brought me over to the IS thinking as well. I've kind of come on to that as a thing that I think adds a lot of value to the world. And so it's good to.
It's last on my list. I'm going to ramp up SAST first. I'm going to ramp up SCA second. Maybe I'll do IS third if there's a good use case for it. Hey, Chris, I'll go one further. Can I talk some more smack? You ready?
Yeah.
Software composition analysis tools. You ready? They're all going away. Snyk is dead as a company, and all that software composition analysis it's just a feature of SAST. That's where it's going to go. And the whole software composition analysis industry, the whole SBOM industry, the whole tooling industry in that world is all going away. And it's just going to be a feature of static analysis. So we're going to end up with no SCA. It's just a SAST feature. No DAST. It's too slow. SAST is going to rule security assessment. And it's going to get a lot better. We see vendors like SemGrep, Shift Left, and others making a lot of innovation there. And we're going to be scanning code to do the majority of our security assessment, then do some container scanning and other secondary things. But SAST is going to rule the world when it comes to application security.
So static code analysis is a slow operation today.
No, it's not. No, that's completely wrong, Matthew. Look at next generation. You got to look at the old tools like a check marks. I'm a big fan of these folks. You do the initial scan, it's extremely slow. But then you do the incremental scan, it's lightning fast. You take a tool like SemGrep from Return to Corp that was built, it's a semantic grep engine. I can scan millions of lines of code in under 2 minutes. So you got to look at the modern tooling in the SCA world and to pick the right vendor. You do have DevOps speed. CodeQL built into GitHub, lightning fast. But the old tools in their initial scan mode are slow. But new tools or incremental mode does work at DevOps speed. And that's, Matthew, that's why I love SAST so much, because of that speed and increased fidelity that I've seen over the years.
So, Jim, two things. First of all, big parenthesis here. I will not say the name of the company because I work for it, but the way you're talking, I have some tools to show you, so catch me outside. But
Snyk is dead.
No, it's not Snyk.
No, they're bleeding cash. They're predatory in their practices for doing sales.
No,
they're building a tool that I can rewrite in 2 days, and they're an $8 billion company hanging off an easy to build tool. SAST is hard. SCA is not. They're all going to be features of SAST. I predict it. Watch.
I'm just going to tell you that I have some integrations that you're going to love. When it comes to data, I am like a dog. Okay.
All right.
Anyway,
convince me. I always like,
but
I'm wrong.
The next thing. So you've been talking about tools. You've been talking about SAST, how important it is, and all that stuff. And of course, one nowadays cannot go for too long without saying anything about AI and all that good stuff. But now developers are working with all kinds of looking over their shoulders, coding assistants and whatnot, which are fed as well by AI, trained and whatnot. And I'm starting to see a cycle here where AI writes code and AI checks code, and there's a developer somewhere running around asking, what did I write? What did the AI write? And who's checking this? And how much can I trust this? How much do you trust code that comes from an AI assistant these days?
I need to go back. I'm not done with my Snyk rant. I want to say one more thing about Snyk, and then I'm going to say something nice. If I had to buy a tool today, that's where I would go. Their enterprise glue is the best of any tool out there. The people that work for the company are exceptional. They're great, brilliant professionals. And I would buy them today. I'm just talking about the future. I think, and that's why Snyk put out a SAST engine, right? That's really innovative. So I'm not trying to I have a lot of respect for the company, a great deal. I would buy them in a heartbeat. I recommend them all the time. I'm predicting out in the future that it's going to be a hard industry to keep in. It's going to merge into SaaS. That's all I'm trying to say. All right. Yeah, I'm done with that. I'm done.
Now go to the AI part.
So AI, all of a sudden, tools like Black Duck are more important, right? Black Duck is an old school like licensing engine, and it's an old school software composition analysis tool back in the day. So the tools that have the ability to look at segments of code and check for licensing is suddenly really important in the advent of AI. Because as a developer, I will use AI all day long for a million purposes. I have ChatGPT on my chat. I've paid ChatGPT with multiple unique plugins, some that I built myself that I use for my work to do research and similar. And to be a developer and not to use AI, I got the corona from the conference. I'm sorry. Got that corona. But to be a developer and not leverage AI, you're going to be way behind the 8 ball real fast, because I can work. It's tripled to quadrupled my productivity. But I use it for a lot of reasons. Okay, give me the initial stubbed out code for this need. Done. Hey, here's some code I'm working on. I hope my boss doesn't mind this. Please analyze this. What can I do better? And the answers I get, and I'm not agreeing with everything AI says. I'm not just blindly using it, but it's like a co-pilot. And I use my own discernment and review before I push this stuff live. To use AI as a developer is necessary. And if you don't, your productivity is going to be 1/3 to 1/4 of your peers, and you're out. So not only is AI important, it's now mandatory for development. If you want to be efficient, we have to be discerning, and you need to have tools in place to make sure that you're not busting out licensing issues. You're not breaking the licensing by stealing code from other teams. And there are tools to assist with that should be in place. But how's that, Izar?
I'm coming here from a point where, like the paranoid in the room, I'm thinking that something here sounds fishy. And you, as the code security expert for me, explain to me how this look of AI talking to AI, checking AI. And the fact that those AIs are trained on code that is not necessarily known to be safe and secure.
No.
So where do I get some assurance in here that what's coming out is good enough? Especially if developers start leaning so much on the AI that, as anything else in life that gets automated and assisted, their own tolerance goes down because they start trusting that thing more.
First and foremost, I take a big chunk of code, throw it into AI, and say, do static, check security of this code, and I get results comparable to professional tools. So AI has security awareness if you ask the right questions, right? If you just say stub you out some code, they'll stub you out some code. But if you say stub you out some code securely, it will do that. And you need to use discernment. First of all, I'm reviewing any code that I generate with AI. And second, before I push it live, Izar, I'm doing static analysis with multiple tools, by the way. I'm doing software composition with great tools like Sneak. This message is brought to you by Sneak Marketing. I'm also, I have some custom rules that I'm doing. I'm doing container scanning. I'm using other cloud security services. So I'm not just generating code in AI and pushing it live. That's nonsense. I have multiple layers of licensing and security checking along the way. But if I have that in place, the whole DevOps security lifecycle, Izar, I can whip out some code fast, like greased lightning. Right?
So here's the other kind of side of the coin, I guess. When I think about AI, I'm in the same boat as you. I think about it as enhancing. It's not replacing.
Not replacing. Nope.
I don't care what anybody says. Like maybe 10 or 20 years from now, I'll just be able to tell it, write me a full web application that does this, this, and that, and I can just deploy it in 5 seconds or whatever. But right now, it's an enhancement. It makes you a 10% to 50% better developer. But then I think about training data. I think about where, Jim, you've taught secure coding for a long time. The Stack Overflow problem has always been fun because people would go to Stack Overflow, they would copy a snippet of code, they would paste it in, and scientists went and studied Stack Overflow code and figured out that there was a certain number of vulnerabilities per example or whatever. Like Stack Overflow code was found to be not very secure.
Bad.
Now, if somebody's training an AI based on Stack Overflow, which is one of the, you could argue there is probably not a better source of total number of lines of code on earth than what exists in Stack Overflow's database. But if you're training the AI to code insecurely with Stack Overflow code, how does that not get reflected right back into, and I get your discernment, but not everybody's got your discernment though. Not everybody's got your knowledge and experience to be able to wrestle and understand that something's bad coming out of the AI.
It's not that big of a deal. I get out of the AI, I get it working, and then I do security scanning and fix my vulnerabilities if they're still there. It's not, and if you're using AI without security review, you're screwed in a bad way. So the answer is do proper DevOps style security review with proper tooling, review the code you get out of AI before you push it live, and make sure when you're asking AI questions, you ask for security. Stub me out this and that with really good security in mind, and it will use that part of the model, if it's even in the model, to answer the question. Seriously, just try it. Say, give me a basic Ruby on Rails app for a web app that does chat. And then ask the same question to say, do it with extremely rigorous security, and you'll get different answers. So it's about asking your AI the right engine. The marketplace, Chris, will eventually become the different models. So my prediction is I'll be able to buy a model of really good application security fixes across all different languages and ask that engine a lot more accurate questions. Eventually, okay, here's an even bigger prediction. Static analysis is going away. I can just use AI to do it. So static analysis past 10 years will be gone. We'll just ask AI. AI will be looking over my shoulder saying, Jim, you did that wrong, or fix it for me or whatnot. So, I mean, AI already is really good static analysis as is if you ask the right questions.
So unbelievably so, we do have people watching us on LinkedIn, and that's only because of Jim. And if any of you guys watching would like to ask any questions, please feel free. Just put it in there, and we're going to try and sneak that in somehow.
While we're waiting for that, I do have a question for you. I'm going to switch gears a little bit here if I can. So, as you know, there's been a flurry of activity coming out of U.S. White House and CISA and NIST and others. And there's a big push recently around memory-safe languages, switching to memory safety in languages as part of secure by design, secure by default. What are your thoughts on that? Is it worth it? Should we move there? Is that the place to go?
I've been a Java programmer since the 90s, so I only use, for the most part, I only use memory-safe languages, right? They prevent common vulnerabilities. They reduce exploitation. It's actually a simpler development process. I'm not doing memory management. It's way more cost efficient. I don't have to do memory fixes. They're usually part of modern software ecosystems. They're more reliable overall. So this is a great thing. But when I hear this being said, I'm like, yeah, I made that call about 25 years ago. So I'm not sure why they're talking about it now. They're probably thinking the world of more thick client development and C++ type development.
IoT device development.
I'm sorry?
IoT device development. Embedded development.
Embedded. But this is why I'm although it's not my world, the people that teach for me that it is their world, they tell me to push Rust. They say, get away from C++, move that kind of development into the Rust world, and a lot of the memory problems you see in C and C++ largely go away. I don't know if that's true, but I think it's extremely reasonable to push towards Rust, to use memory-safe languages and stop doing manual memory management. And I made that call about 25 years ago. One more thing.
All right, we got somebody.
Back to AI real quick. You know why I like AI, Chris? Is because it lets me build gangster rap about my friends. That's what I use AI for mostly. Real quick, Chris. Real quick. So verse 1, you ready, Chris? Real quick. Chris Romeo on the mic, security pro, dropping knowledge everywhere that he go. From the boardroom to the streets, he's the one to beat. When it comes to AppSec, he brings the heat. Now, Chris Romeo, security's Romeo. He's guarding the gates, never moving slow. From the east to the west, he's the best, no contest. Chris Romeo, security's Romeo. One more. With the hacker's mind and the teacher's soul, he's patching up systems and making them whole. From SQL injection to buffer overflow, Chris is the name that the hackers know. So that's my favorite use of AI. Very cool. All right, all right.
Oh, very good. I'm honored. I'm honored. So Tony Quadros had a good question here that I want to get your take on, because we talked a lot about SAST and AI and how these things are going to come together. So Tony says, what about auto remediation for SAST findings? Is that legit?
Oh,
Like, what are your
yeah.
thoughts on that?
But you need the right model. So here, I had this conversation at DEF CON with a few vendors. So there are a couple vendors out there who've been doing scanning and security testing at a giant scale. Think like EdgeScan, think like the white hats of the world, those who do security as a service. And they have and EdgeScan's my favorite right now, but basically think about the millions of vulnerabilities they discovered. Developers tried to fix them, and then they went and reassessed if the fix was proper. So if I can pull like a 10-year model of all the software security fixes that worked, I'm going to be able to have a really good remediation engine. But I have to be very careful how I train that engine. I have to look at each vulnerability and each fix and be really clear that that's a proper fix to add to the model. The data is out there. Human beings, I think, will need to sort through the data to fill the model. But once that's done, I'm predicting a year or two out, remediation engines are going to light up the industry. And the things we're going to be doing will be SAST, SCA, which are going to merge, I believe, and remediation engine suggestions are going to be a really big thing in like about a year or two. So I'm with you, Tony. I think remediation and AI and proper data sets and manual curation of that data sets for remediation will change the industry when it comes to auto remediation. Go build it. Someone's got to build it.
I just saw a good question pop in about, let me read it. This might be, Jim, we'll let you take it first, but this might be a Matt and Izar question. What considerations should we have when performing threat modeling for applications that use artificial intelligence?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I'm actually just building my AI security class now. So there's give me that question one more time. I'm going to light this up in AI.
So what considerations should we have when performing threat modeling for applications that use artificial intelligence?
Gotcha. That's a really good question. I'm going to get help on this question because I want to be really detailed in my answer. And so
wait, hold on. So Skynet is basically providing you the answer to this question.
No,
about Skynet.
No, it's just ChatGPT-4's data model with the web crawling plugin and a few other technical plugins that I wrote to give me good answers. Okay. Data poisoning, model inversion, adversarial attacks, model stealing, model explainability, data privacy, infrastructure security, supply chain threats. So all different tools that are relatively new, bias and fairness about how you're training your model, robustness and generalization, feedback loops where AI models influence the data they later consume, consider potential dangerous feedback loops, resource exhaustion, AI takes a lot of horsepower, reproducibility, model drift as it learns over time in the wrong direction, simple access control, regulatory and compliance that's coming up. So there you go. So when it comes to like threat modeling AI, there's a lot of good information already out on this topic specific to the different AI engines. And I'll pick one, like model stealing, right? A threat actor might be able to replicate a proprietary model by using the public API, asking a lot of questions and extracting parts of the model out for their own use. Got to be careful about that. Or model inversion. Attackers might attempt to reconstruct the training data by querying the AI model, revealing sensitive data they shouldn't be revealing. Data poisoning. We saw this in some of Microsoft's early AI. A bunch of racists began to like train the AI with a lot of really horrible ideas, and the AI engine itself became extraordinarily racist, and they shut that thing down. So ChatGPT is doing, and I've seen other AI engines that someone plugged into it. My life is difficult. Here are the challenges I'm facing. And the AI engine said, you should kill yourself. This is dangerous to human health, and that is liability for that company. So there's a lot of really rich information out there already on how to threat model an AI-based software that's amazing.
Yeah, before Izar and Matt give us their thoughts on this, I just want to put a plug out there for the OWASP Top 10 LLM project. So yeah, Steve Wilson and the rest of the team. That is a case study in how to build an OWASP project at top speed with 500 volunteers. Like there's a conference talk to be found in that, but that's something I look to as a source of threat as well when I'm and understanding what are the issues in dealing with LLMs. There's a good example there. Matt and Izar, you got anything you want to add on the threat modeling AI side?
So
I think
first of all, yeah.
I was just going to say briefly, actually, you covered everything I was going to cover. The OWASP project is definitely a go-to reference. I put them in chat, folks. If they're not familiar, they can go ahead and take a look at those links. This is, it's the same activity, right? Threat modeling is threat modeling. You're just looking at a different set of threats. And so continue as you work. Sorry, Izar, go ahead.
So I just want to second everything that Chris said about the OWASP top 10 for LLMs. But the one thing where I think that I step away from what a lot of people are talking in terms of threat modeling of LLMs and AI is I'm not focusing so much in the system that's doing the LLM and the AI. I'm more worried about how that thing is interfacing with a lot of other things. So how those are becoming interfaces, and in some cases they are getting common authority over a number of other systems, and we are getting these things that are not completely well understood, that are not completely predictable, and we are giving them privileges and powers beyond what they might be advisable to have right now, right? So I'm putting my focus more on how those things connect with the real world and with whatever comes down on the pipeline from the results that they generate, then, well, actually, in this specific case, prompt injection would be a very important thing to look at. But I'm not as worried about all the poisoning of models or stealing models. Like I'm not focusing on the model itself, basically because I can't understand the math. It's way over my head. The only math that I try to understand is calls, and even that's hard sometimes. So I'm just trying to say these are, again, parts of a big continuum, and I'm putting my eyes on what comes down on that pipeline, not on the other.
So almost the trust boundary. You're thinking about the trust boundary around the AI artifacts, the interfaces that are coming into it. So yeah, that's a good thing to consider. So we're almost out of time here. We've cleared any questions I could see.
There was one that you missed around.
Just a real quick note. Okay. The OWASP top 10 for LLM, I think it's good, but it's really basic. There's not a lot of details there. I want to recommend a resource. And this is something that Gary McGraw has put out. He got a team of PhDs together. It's called the Berryville Institute of Machine Learning. They have their own, this is like PhD-backed research, PhD-level articles. Some of them are hard to read. So I think the OWASP top 10 for LLM is a good place to start. But like any top 10, you read it once and let it go. I think deeper research you'll find like Berryville Institute of Machine Learning and a couple other think tanks that are diving deep. The OWASP top 10 for LLM is surface. It's a good way to start. And this is like BerryvilleIML.com. It's run by Gary McGraw, who is a PhD and a team of PhDs. I like that. And I needed the OWASP top 10 to get me started. And then I'm reading all of his articles and getting a way, way deeper perspective to help me be a better professor. So if I'm going to be in front of students, I need more than the top 10 to be legit.
Right, but Jim, one call out: the work the amazing work that Gary and his team are doing. It goes deeper into the model side and building models and protecting models. The OWASP, I think, focuses a bit more on how you get to use this thing securely. So while I agree with you that the difference in depth is amazing, I think that they work side by side and not sequentially.
I don't think side by side. I think OWASP top 10 first because there's very little detail, and then put it aside and then focus on the more PhD level papers. Because it's just OWASP top 10 for LLM, it's really basic. And I need details to be a good professor. So not side by side, one then the other is my take.
Oh, sorry, as a professor. Okay, I missed that qualitative. Okay, cool.
So there are now two questions on the list for us. I think the first one is probably a Jim targeted question around, it's a two-parter. This is from Max. He was asking, showing the ROI of threat modeling, part A, and part B, correlating results of threat modeling with, say, SAST and other activities throughout the lifecycle. So maybe the first part you could tackle the ROI of threat modeling. Like, how do you demonstrate that? What's your and I know we got just a few minutes left.
ROI of threat modeling. I don't do threat modeling consulting, and that's not even an interesting question to me. But I know that for those of you who do threat modeling as part of your job, it's a lot more important. So again, I'm getting assistance here, like define the cost, ongoing cost, quantify the benefits. Does it actually prevent security incidents, reduce remediation cost, improve security posture? How do you even study that? I bet the cost to study if your threat modeling was useful is like the cost of threat modeling itself. So I don't have a good answer to that. But Matthew, Izar, and Chris, I bet you do have a better answer than I'd have about proving the ROI of threat modeling. Any thoughts from you three?
Well, in the manifesto,
have an episode on that.
What was that, Izar?
We should have an episode just on that.
We should. I will just call it in the manifesto. We do call out, of course, the ROI. The fundamental ROI on threat modeling is that you get meaningful and valuable results out of the activity, right? So we want to focus on the results that we get, right, and for the level of effort put in. And as we talked in the very beginning of this episode, you highlighted rightly so that you don't want your entire development staff part of that activity. That doesn't maximize value. What maximizes value is focusing on the hard things, the things that are unique to the system or things that you're innovating on, and or getting everyone together at the beginning of a project so everyone's on the same page as to what they're going to do moving forward, and then focusing on the differences beyond that. And that's where you maximize. That allows you to maximize your value outcome from doing threat modeling without necessarily directly measuring that value.
Matthew, really well said. I'm going to steal that. I'm really impressed. ROI is a simple formula, though. It's a total benefits minus the total costs divided by the total costs. So there's this, and just the problem is to measure the ROI of a threat modeling session is itself mammothly expensive. So I don't. Other than what Matthew said, I don't have a good answer.
Yeah. I mean, I think you got to look at the number of issues that come out of it. That's something that you can metric, and I've seen that be successful before, thinking about let's measure the number of things that were detected from threat modeling sessions, because then it gives us some type of, we can all agree, doesn't matter what formula you use, that, and I don't care whether IBM came up with it or not, it's going to cost more to fix something in production than it does early in the process, right? And so there is a return on investment in finding issues before they get to production. And so I can use that as a soft ROI to say, okay, we found 5 issues during this threat model that would have cost us 5x to fix as rework in 6 weeks or 2 months or 2 years down the road. And so that's kind of my general approach. And I'd love to provide more data to it, but you kind of have to get into the individual company to start wrapping data around.
Let me add one more thing to that thought, Chris. If I use threat modeling and I discovered SQL injection in a pattern, that's not a good use of threat modeling, because I can just catch SQL injection and static analysis with really good accuracy right now. So the question was relating to static analysis. Threat modeling should be identifying things that static analysis can't find well to really measure ROI. And if you do that,
I mean, you're talking business logic, right? Like, there's not a SAST alive that can find
access
business
control.
logic.
Static analysis is useless at access control. That's just a business domain. Static analysis is useless at access control, which is the #1 thing on the OWASP top 10, broken access control, because it's a business domain. Everyone has their own policy. So threat modeling complicated access control systems, I think, is a really good use of time.
Yeah. On the subject of ROI, I'm just going to add one personal thing here. I have what I call question 4A. So question 4 on the 4 questions is, did we do a good enough job? To me, question 4A is asking the participants, would you do this again? If they are able to come back to me and say, this had value for me and I would do it again, I just proved ROI of it.
And if you bring pizza to the meeting, that will go up.
Proven. Proven over the
That's
years.
allowed.
Bring
That's
that
allowed. All right, well, folks, we're coming towards the top of the hours in sight here. Jim, I got one lightning round question for you because I haven't interviewed you in a couple of years, and I haven't heard your take on this. It might be kind of a hot take, but that's okay. We've had plenty of those throughout the episode here. Where do you stand on the whole shift left thing?
I don't. I mean, I can debate either side. I can debate shift left. John Steven has given me a lot of reasons to want to shift right, actually. Let developers crank and deal with it later. So I see emerging research and emerging intelligent discussion on both sides of that. I'll say this. I generally like the idea of shift left, but I'm not tied to it because there's a lot of good research and processes that don't believe in that are still successful. So I think it's one modality that can be really good for application security, but I'm not religious about it. There's other ways to go about things successfully. There you go.
That's a great answer. It's a great way of describing it. I think I fall into the same category of we can shift left, but we can also shift right. So I like where you landed there. So, folks, we're gonna wrap up this episode. Thanks to Jim for being a part of this and joining us on the security table. This will be available as a recording, both in podcast form and on our YouTube channel, so people can go back and listen again or share it with other folks. You can also find Jim. Jim didn't even mention it, but Manico security is what Jim does in his day job, as well as advise lots of other startups out there. So check him out from that perspective. Follow him on Twitter. Find him on LinkedIn. And he's a wealth of knowledge, and I always enjoy an opportunity I get to interact with you, Jim, and learn from you. And
it's my pleasure. I'm a big fan, Chris and Izar and Matthew. Thank you for having me on the show. I had a great time.
Excellent. Thank you.